Good evening, all.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yes, good evening. Okay. So you're running pretty late with the previous sessions, right? Okay. Anyways, we start with management fundamentals. Up till now, whatever we had covered up was we started with defining the term. What do we understand by manager? Then what is managing all about? Workplace. What do we mean by the term workplace? An organization and management functions, right? Now today in session 2, we'll be dealing with Mintzberg's managerial roles, then the universality of management, that is, it is applicable everywhere in the entire universe, and what were the different approaches to management that were being developed over the period of time. How did it evolve as a separate discipline as such, right? And what are the contributions made by the great authors to this field of management, right? Okay. So somewhere we started with manager, where we said that a manager is a person who manages or is in charge of something. But then one again has to remember that he isn't a magician. It's only through experience and practical knowledge that a manager can become an effective leader. But then first, it's important to recognize the roles and responsibilities of a manager in different organizational structures. So with this, we now move on to Mintzberg's managerial roles, or what are the different roles that are being played by the manager in any organization. Henry Mintzberg, a Canadian management expert and author, he came up with the idea of interweaving practical experience with business theory. Okay. In his 1990 book, Mintzberg on Management, Inside Our Strange World of Organizations, he listed clearly defined roles for managers to become effective leaders over their experience and knowledge, as and how it grows in organization. Now, the Mintzberg managerial roles are categorized under 3 sections: interpersonal, informational, and decisional. Now, these 3 categories comprise of 10 roles of a manager taken all together. To be a good leader, hence, one has to manage the teams by leveraging the strengths, by resolving the conflicts that keep on coming up to the surface on and often, and by prioritizing the tasks. So with this, now we move on to the 10 roles under 3 different categories that each and every manager plays in any organization. Now, Mintzberg managerial roles, it comprised of a variety of responsibilities that were attributed to a manager across divisions. Some of these responsibilities are communication, time management, conflict resolution, and decision making. Mintzberg studied different types of organizations, a wide variety, right from a consulting firm, a school, a tech firm, consumer goods manufacturer, service industry, hospitals, and so on, and identified 10 roles of a managers, which were divided into 3 categories: interpersonal roles, that is relating to a manager's authority in an organization; informational, involving information and data, and its communication to all present in the organization; and most important, as we all know, decision-making role, making decisions, spreading them, and getting them implemented. Okay, so now let us look at each of these roles under the three categories. First is interpersonal roles. Now, in interpersonal roles, it is said that a manager is a figurehead. As the figurehead, a manager is responsible for official and social duties that reflect their status and their authority in any organization. Now, it's all about building a strong relationship not only with the peers in the organization, in whichever hierarchy or level the manager lies, but also along with the subordinates. Because ultimately, he has to get the things done through them. Okay? And one can become a good role model by being empathetic and compassionate. Second interpersonal role is that of a leader. Now, a leader, he acts as a role model for everyone. He inspires, he encourages, and he boosts your morale. Managers build lasting relationship with the team members. How? By monitoring their performance and giving them the necessary coaching as and when needed by them. Okay, that's where emotional intelligence can help a manager develop a trust-based relationship in their teams. Third role, interpersonal role, is that of liaison. That is, a manager has to exchange information with various departments and teams, as well as with the external stakeholders of business. Not only the internal, but also the external stakeholders. Stakeholders, we mean all those who are interested within the organization or those who have the stake in the organization. Now, liaising with other organizations, competitors, and again government representatives, all the external stakeholders, is equally essential and important for professional development, as is the role, important liaising role within the organization. So this is as far as the interpersonal with respect to the personnel within and outside the organization are concerned. A figurehead, a leader, and a liaison. Next we come across is informational roles. A manager, in informational roles, we have the monitor. Now, what is a monitor supposed to do? A monitor is responsible for gathering the intel for sustained competitive advantage. Now, to do that, a manager has to assess the market for the changes, collect relevant data that could impact the organization. And these are the stages in the process of strategic management that will help the organization to survive in competition. Because the external environment of business, on a continuous basis, it keeps on adding threats to the existence of the organization. It could be by way of a competitor introducing a new product. It could be a sudden fall in demand for the product, or it could be the other way around, where the customers are expecting something more than what you are offering to them, right? So that's the reason why a manager has to act as a monitor with respect to the information that is brought to him from the external environment of business. Second is disseminator. The disseminator, as a disseminator, a manager communicates the useful and relevant information to the team members and to the subordinates. Now here it is important to invite feedback to invite ideas, and to invite the views from the different employees within the organization to keep an open channel of communication. The third important role is that of a spokesperson. What is a spokesperson supposed to do? He conveys the important information about the organization to the external stakeholders of business. Now, this could be for public relations purpose or addressing the government policies, or it could be, say, dealing with suppliers. One must have a clear-cut idea of the company's brand image to become a successful spokesperson. So this is about the three informational roles: as a monitor, looking into the challenges and finding the data; second, spreading the information; and third, acting as a spokesperson for the organization by having a clear idea of the company's brand. The third category is decisional roles. In decisional roles, we have an entrepreneur. A manager has to be prepared to take initiative as a part of his managerial duties. He has to initiate the projects and address concerns within the organization. How? With effective problem solving skills, conflict management, being empathetic at the same time along with the team members, right? Icebreakers and team building activities over here would be of great help, especially when a manager is required to connect with different teams. Second important role is a disturbance handler. Now, as a disturbance handler, a manager ensures that everything runs smoothly. Okay. The key responsibilities over here will include resolving the conflicts. How will the conflicts be resolved? With mentoring sessions. Having mentoring sessions with the employees, with the team members, with the subordinates, understanding their perspective of a particular situation, then identifying areas for improvement, and thereby addressing the gaps in teamwork. Further, he also works as a resource allocator. Now, what does a resource allocator do? Is concerned with allocation. Allocation of what? It is allocation of funds and resources that are available with the organization, right? So as a resource allocator, he is concerned with the allocation of funds. And how does this allocation take place? By cutting down the costs and distributing the resources so that the most optimum utilization of all the available resources, be it men, material, or machines, or money, whatever, all the ends of man which are required to run business, right? So optimum utilization of all the resources. Next is negotiator. Now, as a negotiator, as a successful negotiation leads to what? A successful negotiation always leads to a win-win situation, a win-win outcome, right? Where both the parties are benefited. Similarly, a manager has to participate in negotiations amongst or with the team members as well as other stakeholders. Not only the team members within the team, but also outside the team in order to reach a favorable outcome for both the parties. Now, this role as a negotiator, it distinguishes a manager from one manager from the other manager because he has to consider his team's best interests. right? So every manager working in the different department has to consider their team's interest while taking or while negotiating the things with the other stakeholders. Now, so with this, we are done with the Mintzberg's managerial roles, the decisional roles, the informational roles, and the interpersonal roles. Okay. Now, the next concept that we will be handling today is universality of management. What do we mean by this? The universality of management is a concept that all the managers do the same job, irrespective of or regardless of the title of the manager, the position of the manager, or the management level. Remember, they all execute the 5 management functions that we have studied: planning, organizing, staffing, directing, and controlling and coordinating, right? All the managers, irrespective or regardless of their title, position, or management level, they execute all the management functions and they work through and with others, through others and with others to achieve the organizational goals. Now, again, universality of management means that the principles of management are applicable to all the types of organizations and their levels. Now, this indicates that the managers apply the same management principles and skills in all the organizations. So, thus, universality would mean the transferability of management skills across countries and across industries. Whichever country it is, whichever industry it is, the management skills can be transferred universally. Okay, so certainly we can say that the jobs of the manager differ or might differ somewhat from one form of a company to other, because each company type needs the application of a specialized type of knowledge. It survives in a unique operational as well as a political environment, and it applies different technology. But then there are similarities in managerial jobs across companies, since the basic managerial functions are common to all the companies. Now, a research was being made by William Moose that was published in the Academy of Management. Okay. In a study of 72 social fraternities, the author found that there was significant positive relationship between the degree to which these organizations used selected management practices and the success ranking they achieved by application of these practices of management. Okay, so now this further confirms to the belief that management principles or practices, they have a universal application. So it's not only that we are studying theoretically that it is there, a research has been done and it has been published and confirmed that yes, management is applicable in the entire universe, whichever industry it is, whichever form of organization it is the same everywhere. Okay. So with this universality of management, now we look into how did management evolve as a different discipline, or what were the different approaches in the evolution of management, right? Now, basically these approaches fall under 3 categories: the classical approach, behavioral approach, okay, and the quantitative approach. So we begin with the classical approach. Now, the classical school, it represented the first major systematic approach to the thought of management. Okay, the thought process evolved that how should a manager or how should a person in charge of getting things done from people, how should he manage? Now, this classical school, again, it can be further broken down into three historical philosophies of management. That is again how the manner in which it evolved. Okay, and looking into the years, how it evolved. The entire development of this management thought is divided into three categories. That is the scientific management, administrative approach, and bureaucratic model. With this, in a classical approach, let us look into the scientific management first. Now, the growth of factory system, okay, with industrial revolution, what happened? Factories came into existence. Manufacturing of products took place in factories. And with the growth of this factory system, it led to numerous problems in not only the production, but also in controlling the labor. Managers could not solve the problems by trial and error methods within the factories. And hence, the results of the production processes, it could not be predicted. So, thereby the need arose for managing in a better manner or for better management techniques. The use of method of science for solving management problems was thought of then. Okay, and the scientific management concept was first developed thereby by F.W. Taylor in between 1985 and 1911. So that's where F.W. Taylor is being called as the father of scientific management. In 1878, he joined as a laborer at Midway Steel Company in US. From that position, he progressed. He got promoted with his hard work to become the chief engineer in 1884. Mind well, from 1878, he joined as a laborer and he rose to the position of chief engineer in 1884. He published papers on piece rate system, then the art of cutting metals, and the shop management. And all his papers were published in the book, The Principles of Management, in 1911. Further, F.W. Taylor discovered the application of method of science for solving the industrial problems. So now, the application of scientific methods, meaning thereby from the perspective of F.W. Taylor, was adopting certain procedures to solve the problems within the factories. So what was the procedures that one should adopt in order to solve these problems? He laid down the procedures. They were, first is observation. Observe how things are being taken place. Then measure the problematic area. Experimental comparison. After measuring, experiment as and how or the different methods in which you could solve the problem, and then formulation of the procedure, a scientific one, in order to solve the same problem. Further, F.W. Taylor applied the scientific approach not only to the technical problems that arose in the production processes, but also to the behavioral human problems. Okay. So now let us move on to the main features of Taylor's scientific management. We could sum up them together as into 5 features of scientific management. Science and not rule of thumb. Okay. Taylor said that rule of thumb would not help to solve problems in industries. No trial and error method should be adopted. He believed in scientific methods and scientific approach in solving any problem. He said that by applying the scientific methods, the industrial efficiency can be improved. How this could be improved? As given below. One is standardization of working condition. Okay. The working conditions, that is the workplace at which the workers and the employees are working, you standardize the conditions of work over there. That is nothing but providing good working condition. And this in turn will improve the industrial efficiency. Now, the different working conditions that he identified were, say, proper lighting, ventilation, controlled temperatures, humidity, cleanliness, noise, seating arrangements, and so on. So applying scientific approach, F.W. Taylor found out that there should be certain minimum required set of working conditions with respect to all those that were discussed, with respect to lighting, with respect to ventilation, seating arrangements, cleanliness, ventilation, and so on. Now, second was standardization of working methods. According to F.W. Taylor, for doing any job, the best method should be found out. And in order to do that, he studied, or he invested his precious time in motion study, which is now called as method study technique for standardizing the working methods. In this, the method of doing a job is scientifically studied. The waste efforts are eliminated, and ultimately, these efforts resulted in savings in the human efforts because unnecessary activities were being deleted while studying the different activities or operations that were involved in performing any job, right? So after standardization of working conditions and working methods, then F.W. Taylor, he came up with establishing the standard of performance. So Taylor then said that the production time for each and every job should be found out scientifically. For this, he invented the time studies technique. Here, the each and every job within the industry was broken down into different elements. Each element was identified, was named, was termed separately, and then the total time for the job was found out, adding together the time required for each of its different elements. Now, this in turn helped to plan the daily work of each and every worker in 7 or 8-hour shift. What was the worker supposed to perform? What was he supposed to give? So standards of performance for different types of works and different types of workers were laid down thereby. So be it working conditions, methods, and performance standards, it was studied, each and every aspect was studied scientifically. Okay, so As per him, it was a science and not a rule of thumb. Next feature of scientific management was harmony and not discord. Taylor said that the employer and employees, they should have a complete understanding. The interest of the employer and the employees should be the same. And at the same time, the interest of the employees should be such that it is goal congruent with the goals and the objectives of the basic existence of the business enterprise. Next, maximum output and not restricted output. After studying the working methods, method study, time study, and job study, Taylor evolved methods of getting more production from workers. He said that the workers, they should be encouraged for higher production. Now, how could a worker be encouraged in order to give more in the given time? Now, this was done by giving incentive wages for those who produced higher or for the higher performers, better performers. He introduced differential piece rate system for this purpose, which indicated that the workers who produced above the standard levels of performance, they were paid at a higher piece rate. And those whose production was lower, they were paid at a lower piece rate. So automatically, the workers working in the different departments, they were motivated to be focused, to give more and more of production, and thereby increase their earnings from the jobs. Next feature of scientific management was specialization. In this specialization, again, there was separation of physical and mental activity. Taylor said that the workers must be relieved of mental activities. So he separated the mental activity from the physical activity. Now, physical activities were carried out by the people inside the shop, and mental activities, they were carried out by people in the office. So we can refer to this as factory functions and admin functions, right? Now, he evolved the functional organizational structure as a whole. He identified the activities in an industry into 8 major functions. They were called as the gang boss, the speed boss, the repair boss, inspection boss, instruction card clerk, time and cost clerk, route clerk, and a disciplinarian. Okay, so the first 4 foremen, that is the gang boss, speed boss, repair boss, and inspection boss, they worked in the shop floor, on the shop floor. Whereas the other 4, that is the instruction card clerk, time and cost clerk, route clerk, and disciplinarian, they worked in the office. Then we come across training and development of workers, which was a must as per Taylor's scientific management. Once they were boosted in their morale to produce more. Now, Taylor here insisted that the workers should be given proper training before they are put into the production line itself, so that they are able to perform better right from day one, since they would be aware of what is expected from their respective jobs. He also said that the selection of workers should be done on a scientific basis. Right person should be employed for the right job. So that's about F.W. Taylor's contribution to the management. Right? The father of scientific management, where he came up with the application, he came up with the scientific methods, he came up with the procedures for solving problem, and he came up with the features of scientific management. Now, another important contribution was the development of scientific management towards the development was made by Frank B. Gilbreth and his wife Lillian Gilbreth. Now, both of them, as husband and wife team, they contributed extensively towards the concept of scientific management. Now, they were on a major basis, they focused on time study and motion study, and thus it resulted into improvement in the time and motion elements. How? By eliminating the unwanted ones, thereby resulting into savings in the costs. They were also responsible for such management tools that they came up with time study and motion study, like the process chart, the flow diagrams, and the merit rating system for the employees. Now, it was over here that Lillian Gilbreth, she identified 18 basic motions or hand motions by breaking down the tasks into the fundamental elements. Okay, so the 18 tasks that she identified for or the motions that were identified, hand motions that were identified, were searching, finding, selecting, grasping, transportation, being loaded, positioning, assembling, disassembling, inspection, releasing the road, emptying the transport, resting, unavoidable and avoidable delays, planning, and holding. Now, all these elements or hand motions that we discussed right now, they are not necessarily sequential in nature, but they are all the essential elements of any activity or for performing any activity, right? So this study that was made by Lillian Gilbreth, it laid the foundation for areas of job simplification, that how could a job or a particular task be simplified, setting up the standards of work, and then setting up of the incentive wage plans for the workers who gave better performances. Now, the next contributor to the scientific management after F.W. Taylor and Frank and Lillian Gilbreth was Henry L. Gantt. Now, he worked with Taylor and he evolved the techniques of scheduling the work and controlling the work. His most significant contribution was the famous Gantt chart. He provided a system for controlling and for scheduling of the work, which is still used today in many of the industries for controlling the projects as well as controlling the departmental work. He also developed the task bonus system. Now, this bonus system, it rewarded the efficiency on part of individual workers and also assured a standard remuneration to all, irrespective of individual output. Now, what does this mean? That apart from the output being given by the workers, they would be getting certain basic remuneration for working for a given number of days. And then in addition to that, based on their performance or level of efficiency, further they would be given incentives accordingly. Okay, it was also called as task and bonus plan. So it was aimed at providing extra wages for extra work in addition to a guaranteed minimum wage. Again, bonuses were not only given to the workers, during his tenure, but they were also awarded to supervisors who are successful in getting their workers to meet the desired goals, output goals. Further, we have Harrington Emerson, another author who came up with 12 principles with respect to the efficient use of organizational resources in his books 12 Principles of Efficiency, that was published in 1912. Okay, the most important amongst them, among the 12 principles, were proper job description based on an objective and fact-based analysis, discipline, integration of jobs, need for accurate records and work instructions, and rewards for efficiency. Okay, so according to Harrington Emerson, if these 12 principles they exist in any organization, then they are bound to become efficient in whatever they are trying to achieve. So that's where his book played a major role. So now that's with respect to scientific management and the contributions made by the different contributors in the classical approach of management. Now, after classical approach, we will be then looking into behavioral approach and quantitative approach. Right? Now, within classical approach, we are yet to move or yet to study the administrative management approach and the bureaucratic model. So I think that should be all for today. Do we stop over here or do we continue? Yes, students?
It's okay, ma'am. I think we have 10 minutes, but I'm not
Okay.
sure how far.
Okay. So in classical approach itself, after dealing with scientific management, okay, wherein the contributions were made by F.W. Taylor, Frank and Lillian Gilbreth, Gantt chart, and Harrington Emerson, let us look into administrative management approach. What does administrative management approach speak about? Scientific management, as we saw, it focused primarily on the efficiency of production, right? But what about the administrative efficiency? Administrative management, it focuses on formal organization structure and the delineation of the basic process of general management. This approach is also known as the functional or the process approach, and it is based primarily on the contributions and the ideas of Henry Fayol. Now, Henry Fayol, he is recognized as the first person to systematize the administrative approach and its activities into 6 groups, all of which are closely dependent upon one another. Rather, there are 5 groups. They are the technical, the financial, the commercial, accounting, and the managerial. Now, he broke down the managerial function into 5 steps, including planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, and controlling. Further, in order to have a proper administration within the organization, he developed 14 management principles that are widely circulated as a guide to management thought even today. Now let us look into this 14 management principles one by one. First one, that is division of work. As the name suggests, a work is given on each and every worker is given only a particular work to be done. Okay, and not the entire work. A part of the work is being given. Why? So that each and every worker, he can become a specialized or a specialist while performing those tasks on a repetitive basis, and this specialization will bring better efficiency, and that would result in more and more of output of the repetitive task being performed by a single worker. So that is division of work. Divide the work and delegate the same work to the worker. Then is authority. What do we mean by the term authority? When I say that you are authorized to do so, it means you get the right to direct to get the work to be done from someone else who is working under you. Now, this authority is given to execute the responsibilities that are entrusted to a manager, and the responsibility is the accountability of the authority. Now, next is discipline. As defined by Henry Fayol, discipline is an outward mark of respect for employment agreements and the organizational rules. And this should be enforced fairly and judiciously in an organization. So only where disciplines exist, it is possible that the entire organization works in an or comes up with efficiently with the desired objectives. Then we have unity of command. Unity of command. Who is being commanded? The employees and the workers are being commanded to do what? To carry out their respective roles. But at the same time, it is also essential that the employee, they should be receiving the orders from a single supervisor, a single authority. Why? Because if this is not followed, there will always be some kind of confusion amongst the minds of the employees with respect to the work to be carried out, and this would lead to conflicts within the workers, not only within the workers but also within the managers and their subordinates. Next is unity of direction. According to Fayol, there should be one head and one plan for a group of activities. For example, if we are speaking about the production function, the production department should have just one production manager. Why? Because without the unity of direction, that is, everything has to move, everything with respect to production, he is supposed to give the necessary directions. Why? Because without this unity of direction, unity of command will not function. There will be more than one person who are dictating their own terms and conditions with respect to the job that is required to be carried out. Right? Next, we have subordination of individual interest to common goal. No doubt that every employee who gets employed in a business organization, he is working for and with his individual interest. But again, this individual interest has to be, what would be his individual interest? To earn money, to earn better, to rise his position, right? To move ahead in the organization, to get promoted and so on. These would be the individual interests of any employee. But then these individual interests, it is a must that they should be in alignment with the organizational interest also. So the employee should give importance first to the general interest and the common goal for which the business organization is being set and within which he is giving or rendering his services. Next, remuneration to staff. Now, remuneration, what do you mean by remuneration? The earnings, okay? The payment for services that are being made to the employees for the services rendered by them. Now, since this remuneration and the additional incentives inspires the employees to provide their maximum effort to the organization, not only the amount of the payment, but also the methods of the payment, they need to be chosen carefully, and they have to be paid fairly considering the environment in which the industry or the organization is being placed. Then we have centralization. Now, if the top level person has the full power, okay, to direct the things in an organization hierarchy, then such an organization will be set to practice centralization. But exactly opposite, if the power is delegated to any number of subordinates, then it will be called as decentralization. Now, according to Henry Fayol, he believed that while some authority should be given, no doubt, to the subordinates. Why? So that they are able to make the decisions and they are having the necessary freedom to decide in a given situation. Whereas all the policy decisions should be made at the top management level. So, so in a way, according to him, there has to be centralization with respect to the top management level and policy decisions, and there a decentralization at the same time should exist to give the subordinates the necessary freedom to carry out their work. Next we come across is scalar chain. By scalar chain, we mean the line of authority. Now, or the hierarchy within the organization. Now, according to this principle, the entire communication that flows in the organization, by communication over here, we mean the orders, the instructions. Now, this has to be necessarily being sent from the top management to the lowest level of management within an organization through the various lines of authority. So that's the principle of scalar chain. Then comes order. This principle indicates the arrangement of resources. They could be physical and human. It means a place for everything and everything in its place. Now, this can be done only by developing proper knowledge of the requirements of the employees and the workers and the resources that are being used by them. Okay, so everything has to be a place for everything and everything in its place. Only if we have such an order in the organization, then it will be efficient in whatever offerings it is being given to the public. Next comes equity. Equity, it's a combination of fairness, kindliness, or let us call it as justice, equal treatment to all those who are working in the organization. So it is not only the chief executive who has to be, very much equitable in dealings with the subordinates, but rather we can say that it is also the duty of the chief executive himself to ensure that the managers at all levels are applying the same equality or equity in their dealings with their subordinates, right? So everyone, all the managers at all the respective levels should be following this principle of equity. Stability of staff. When can we say that the staff is stable in an organization? When the number of people leaving the organization are at a lower end. So higher the labor turnover, what will it indicate? It will indicate bad management practices being practiced and bad results, and this has to be minimized. Okay? Longer the employees and the workers are retained in any organization, better the management and efficiency within the, and we can say that equity in the organization. Initiative. The power of thinking and executing a particular task is called as, or we can say that a person is taking an initiative in doing so whenever he is contributing his thought process towards it and implementing it in the execution of the tasks. So the subordinates should be encouraged to take initiative wherever possible. Only then it would be possible in an organization not only to keep them motivated, but to keep the new ideas flowing and building up of effective plans to carry out the work. The last one to go is esprit de corps. Now, esprit de corps is a French word. Now, this means feeling of harmony and union amongst the people in the organization. So essentially, it means that the employees and the workers within the organization, within the respective functional departments, they should be working as in teams. And that's where the strength of unity will follow in achieving the desired business objectives. Right? So these are Henry Fayol's 14 management principles that should be followed by organizations so that they work efficiently and effectively towards their targets. So thank you, class. We stop here for today. Tomorrow, we will be looking into a few MCQs of whatever we have dealt with today and in the previous session. Fine. So that in case there are any doubts or misunderstandings, they could be cleared there and there itself. Okay, so just remind me to have a revision before we start with the MCQs. Okay, thank you, class. That's all for today.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.